Shri Rama Rama Ramiti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Ramanama Varanani. We delight in the beautiful name of Sri Ram. We do this again and again, for even if we remember once the holy name of Sri Ram, it will bestow the fruit equal to 1,000 names of the Lord Vishnu. And the Lord Vishnu means the one that pervades everywhere. And Sri Rama is seen to be the avatar or the descent, the one that comes from age to age. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy and vigor. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. So we continue with our story of Rama. And last week we remembered how Rama had shot his arrow and Vali received this mortal wound. And then we were discussing the possible moral dilemmas of such an action where somebody shoots from the side. And I think we discussed that thoroughly. Now, one great heroine comes out from this whole story, or this aspect, or this place in the story, and that is this Tara. What a wonderful heroine she is. She stands by her husband, but Valmiki says that Tara in fact knows the truth about Rama, about his divine incarnation. And so there are only, of course, a few people who understand this or know this, but Tara is one of these. And so she sees Vishnu, this all-pervading in him. And of course, the traditional belief is that Sumitra also, who's the mother of Lakshmana, also understands this. And Tara, the wife of Vali, was seen to be a jnani. What is a jnani? Somebody who has direct knowledge of the truth, not somebody who's intellectually astute, but somebody who bypasses all the avenues toward the Supreme. For the vast majority of people in this Kali Yuga, we need the avenue through what is called cosmic mind, that is described here as Vishnu, who incarnates from time to time, from age to age. But we don't have to do that. We can go directly. We don't have to go to the gatekeeper. But this is for people of keen intellect and discriminative understanding. And so Tara is one of these who has gone directly to the truth and understands. She's a knower of what we call reality. Now we understand that this whole story is a drama. And in a drama, we know a drama, if we pay good money to see a film or go to the stage or something, we know that somehow it's not real. And yet, if the drama is well presented, we are caught up in it and assume it to be real. Somebody cries, we cry. Somebody laughs, we laugh. So we reflect whatever is there. Now, at first, of course, Tara feels animosity towards Rama, mainly because of what is perceived as this moral dilemma from last week, that is this treachery. And yet we see, she saw face to face his divinity, Rama's divinity. So it's said. And those who read the story of Rama just as a mere story, a kind of fiction, would find all this is pointless. But to the followers of the path of devotion, of bhakti, this won't sound improbable. And Tulsidas, for example, who has his own version, beautifully done in Hindi, sings at this point that Shiva explains to Parvati, look, Uma, how Rama, the Supreme Being, moves all creatures like puppets tied to strings. Bhakti is needed to realize the full meaning of ancient mythology. So when we listen to these stories, we should find a movement, an internal, exciting movement in us, in the heart. And so to capture that, we can see how Tara is looking now at Rama. We can also see how Hanuman is looking at Rama. We can see not so much Sugriva. Sugriva has his own affairs going on, and we'll see how this doesn't really accelerate the plot or the drama, but how it is also reflects just humanity. When people say, oh, I find my spiritual progress is not moving, I find the mind is so distracted, my standard response is, welcome to the human race. So even on a rational basis, Tara comes out as a kind of diplomat because she now has to persuade all the inhabitants of Kishkinda, no, you need to accept Sugriva as your king. They want her son, Angala, to be the ruler, and they want to block Sugriva out and make a warfare. But she is rational in the midst of her grief. And so she comes out as this diplomat, as an expert in statesmanship, and she has the intelligence to anticipate the coming events that might unfold. And the events will have to be of as peaceful nature as possible. Don't forget, the citizens have lost a king. They had a king. There was great turmoil. First they had Vali, then they had Sugriva. Now the Vali is back again, and now it's Sugriva back again. So stability is required. What has happened has happened. She understands that even the last second you cannot change. There's no point in dwelling on the last second, never mind about the last year or the last 5 years. And so, by his address and good fortune, Sugriva has secured this alliance with Rama, and Vali was no more, and Angada's welfare was all that she would care for thereafter. And so not only the citizens will benefit, but Angada also. And Angada cannot afford really to antagonize Sugriva and Rama. They're much too powerful. And they're also on the side of Dharma. And so Angada is ready to support him. Rama, bow in hand. Peace, not war, was indicated. These are great lessons for all time. Imagine now we can think of at least half a dozen places throughout the world that are in severe turmoil. And everybody talks highly of peace and so on. But really, nobody takes it too seriously. There's a whole United Nations set up with the idea of stabilizing the world through peace and peaceful efforts. But even they have to use troops to establish peace in various regions of the world. Well, peace is a very high standard from an intellectual point of view, but from a practical point of view, we have to get internal peace first. There's no good expecting the world to be peaceful if we are mentally in turmoil. So, when she concealed her anger from Rama and put on an appearance of patient submission to events, she was really securing the best interests of her son Angada and winning for him the compassion and sympathy of all. And so Vali's obsequies, where we left it off last week, were performed with the due form and ceremony. And after the auspicious bath, Sugriva was crowned king. Angada was made the Yuvaraja, that is the king in waiting. Now, right now, of course, as we're talking, many people are looking at the coronation of King Charles III in Britain, and with all pomp and ceremony taking place, these ancient rituals of anointing somebody, making them a special, outstanding citizen that can lead all the other citizens, is a very ancient process. Now, in life, we find many ups and downs. In order to get food, we require rainfall. And it is very traditional in Ireland to have a beginning conversation about the weather. How is the weather today? Because it can be extremely variable. Now, a lot of people complain on a rainy day or rainy and cold day, but really we require the rain, and Ireland is called the Emerald Isle. It's so green. And so in the eastern countries, we have the monsoons. It's not just a little rainfall. It's a rainy season. It's a monsoon season. In India, there are more than several seasons, more than spring and autumn and winter. There are 5 seasons, one of which is the monsoon. And so at this particular critical point, where there's an urgency to enact the alliance that has just been made with Sugriva, stabilizing his kingdom and all the rest of it, Sugriva now has to honor his side of things and mobilize his forces and search out and find Sita. We know where she is, of course, by now, but also to see what is the strategy to gain her back. Internally, Rama is in turmoil. Every day that passes is a delay. And every delay is a sense of yearning and absence. Now, when we look at the philosophical side of the story, we can see how Sita represents the Jiva and Rama represents the divine, and it is this joint, this union, what we call yoga, between the two that we're all looking for. And when we have this yearning heart, that is the precipitating factor to bring this union about. But the frustration is if it's not happening. If this yearning is there, and there doesn't seem to be any so-called progress being made. So we can imagine this rainy season now, this monsoon season, is upon the countryside. And so Sugriva and his companions, they are fine. They go back to Kishkinda and they start celebrating the people who like a little bit of alcohol, a little bit Irish, no doubt. And so Rama and Lakshmana can't go into that. They've made a vow not to go into a city. So what do? They have to look out for a cave, and they find a cave almost as if it's designed for this purpose. They take refuge in there. But now this rainy season is going to last for months and months, and every day, every second that passes by is a moment of anxiety for Rama. There's no doubt. And the forest paths themselves, they get flooded, and you can imagine the rain rushing in torrents, and impossible to cross. They're stuck in this cave. And a cave, of course, is a traditional place of refuge from the Stone Ages. We see some maybe 20, 30,000 years ago, evidence of art on cave walls. We can find it certainly in Africa and also in various parts of Europe and Asia. And so taking refuge in the cave away from the rain being necessary, the necessity for the rain, for plants and so on, we can clearly see. But look at the negative side of it. It binds us now. And so they find themselves helpless. So the search for Sita has to be suspended. And Rama, of course, is in a brooding mood. He's brooding over Sita's predicament, not knowing what will happen or what has happened to her. And so he's plunged into sorrow. And Lakshmana, once more, has to play the role of a counselor. He counsels him to bear with the delay until the end of the rainy season. And Rama is consoled for a moment. Like all of us, we come into some sorrowful condition, but a little bit of stability, a little bit of reasoning, a little bit of fortitude and patience, and we can get back on track. So Lakshmana says something which is very significant. He says that, don't forget who you are in this dark jungle. We seem to be sometimes in a dark jungle with no way out. We go into a state of depression, even momentarily. But it's only because we forgot who we are fundamentally. And our Vedanta philosophy tells us it is not just Rama who is the embodiment of Vishnu, but we ourselves, according to the Vedanta philosophy, are divine beings. You can say something like angels also descended here, playing our part. And so he says, don't forget who you are. And he calls him the prince of the world. You will kill the Rakshasa and have Sita back. Only be brave. And Rama's response is to grow quiet and reflective. And he smiles therefore at Lakshmana and takes his hand. And it has now passed, he says. Like a storm, my sorrow has passed. This continuous adjustment is something we all have to make. And so, in the midst of this keenest sorrow, we find a forbearance necessarily, and also an understanding that things happen in the divine realm, if you like, in the divine plan, in a timely way. It's like there's a cosmic dancer, and every step is exactly at the right place, exactly at the right time. And recognizing this gives us some solace, even here in this life. And so, perhaps heaven's kindest gifts to humans are sleep for the fleeting cares of the day and forgetfulness for the deep-seated injuries of the heart. Now, Kishkinda has also mourned her Vali as well, just for a time, but that also has passed. They also move on. And their mood changes completely. They rejoice in Sugriva and the survivors. And Sugriva forgets the privations of his exile and the remorse for his brother's death. And we find last week this great scene of humility and sorrow on both parts, on both part of Vali as well as Sugriva. And all that is forgotten. And he rejoices in his present prosperity along with everybody. And even Tara, reconciled and adapts herself to altered circumstances, as I say, in the interests of her son. So the royal palace at Kishkinda, in contrast to the cave, was full of joy. And the gloomy months of rain, which the Raghu brothers have spent in leaden-footed repining, sped with gold-winged enjoyment for Sugriva and his household, there's a big contrast. Now, only Hanuman feels anxious. And actually, this is a turning point for Hanuman. Don't forget, the mythology will tell us that Hanuman is the son of, he's one of the Marutis. He's the son of the wind. He's the son of Vayu. And there's a mythology behind that as well. And he can't forget Rama's business because he's conscientious. But that conscientiousness is going to change, it's going to transform into somebody who has adopted a deep love for Rama as his chosen ideal, as his ideal of perfection. And you often see these great, wonderful pictures of Hanuman opening his heart, and there, in the midst of his heart, Rama and Sita are there. Rama and Sita, two sides of the same coin, basically. They are the same thing. And so Hanuman is feeling a little anxious. What's happening? People enjoying themselves, but he's conscious of Rama's plight and of the commitment that they have made. So he was looking actually for an opportunity to remind the king of his promise to Rama. You're going to come, you're going to help. Rama has kept his side of the bargain. What about you? Anyway, at last, after several months, the rains have ceased. Sky clears, it's clear of cloud and lightning, and the air is sweet with the perfumes of flowers. The mixed scenario of life. The rain, so devastating, such a setback, now yields the promise. What are the rains for? Well, we can see sweetness in the air. You know, after rains, there's a special scent from the earth, and the perfumes of flowers and the songs of birds, and joy comes to life in the forest again. There's joy in the Kishkinda, and there's joy in the forest. The intelligent and highly virtuous Hanuman now approaches his king diplomatically. Sugriva had entrusted all official duties to all his ministers. In this way, he was a good king. But he was absorbed in pleasure. In this way, he was not of such strong moral character. And if you have a defect in your moral character, forgetfulness comes in. And so Hanuman knew that the wisest and best of people neglect their promises in such circumstances. And so he talks to the king. He talks with great politeness, diplomacy. You know, somebody who's imbibed a lot of drink, we have to talk very carefully to them. He says, look, you've regained the kingdom of your ancestors. You're in a secure position. You have secure possession and enjoyment of what you have now of the kingdom. But something yet remains to be done. I need to remind you of. You must fulfill your promise to your allies, and so increase your fame and strengthen your power. Now, this is a lesson, of course, in modern politics too, that there are alliances to be made. The ancient Arthashastra will tell us that political people, kings and so on, will have to understand that their country, their particular area of land, is something like a circle in the center. And outside any circle, any area outside that circle, there's a principle of mandala, outside that circle should be considered a potential threat to you. So therefore you make diplomatic alliances with those countries that surround the countries that surround you. This is how the ancient diplomacy works. But we cannot survive without allies and friends on a personal level or on a national level. And so this is your ally. Be careful. And a very strong ally. You've seen the strength. So you must, you must do your part in this alliance. And in doing that, you'll increase your fame and strengthen your power, since that's what you're celebrating right now. And even at the sacrifice of your own interests and your own pleasure, you really should carry out the business of one's friends according to one's promise. And only so can a king's authority and reputation grow. Now, this is a very apt statement because many people will be watching events in England at the moment, a historical event, not happened since 1953. And so a new monarch's popularity is interesting. Just a sideline, of course. He is King Charles III. Now, King Charles I, they severed his head. His head went. They have a statement, uneasy is the head that wears the crown. And so we understand a new monarch will have to rally people around. And so his personality is important. What he says is important. How he presents himself and his country is important. All of this is important. And so his reputation will have to grow, there's no doubt, to solidify any stability from the point of view of those people who support this ancient system within United Kingdom, Great Britain. So it'll be best to fulfill one's promise, says Hanuman. And it's best to do it now, before due date, before things, get a little shaky and distrust settles in. And in any case, delay should be avoided at all costs. And fulfillment after the promised date is actually worse than useless. So you shouldn't wait to be reminded by your friends of what has been promised to them. It's not a good policy. And all this without me telling you, you know it already. Remembering what Rama has done for us, we must take steps to fulfill our promise without waiting to be reminded by your ally. It's not good manners at the very least. Anyway, the rainy season is now over, as we said. There's no ground for further delay. It was a legitimate delay, and that was the rains. And we can no longer postpone the task of looking for Sita. Rama may be very patient, very kind, very forbearing, very honest, very a good ally, a man of his word. But that doesn't justify any further delay on our part. You shouldn't take advantage of that. And didn't Rama kill your enemy quickly, promptly? He never delayed, not minding the danger or the blame involved. So we should fulfill our promise with equal promptness. And in this way, Maruti, the son of Marut, conveys his sagely advice to Sugriva. And Sugriva accepts it and thanks Hanuman. And he orders Nila to mobilize the Vanara army. All the world must be searched and Sita found, he said. Order therefore the most powerful of our Vanaras to come and join up at once. In the ancient days, sometimes there was an army, but sometimes the army had to be recruited. Anyway, those who fail will be summarily punished, he says. Anyway, having said this, Sugriva goes back into his private apartments and forgets. And Rama and Lakshmana, as we know, spent their time in the cave waiting for the end of the rainy season and waiting for the fulfillment now of Sugriva's promise. But when these rains are over and the forest and its creatures are shining with renewed beauty and energy, Rama really grieves more intensely because here's an opportunity to mobilize and nothing seems to be happening. And his greatest pain is the thought of what Sita is currently suffering at the hands of the Rakshasas. And Rama tells us something that is philosophically true. The world is full of life and joy, but Sita is in agony somewhere. Our fellow person is in anger and in a difficulty somewhere. You know, we have to be thankful for what we have. When people say, oh, I have so many problems, okay, but you have clothing, you have food, you have a job. Yes, I have that. Okay, so you're not a refugee, and you have shoes. Yeah. And there was that phrase, I don't know who said it, but I thought I'm paraphrasing, I thought that life was bad because I had no shoes until I saw someone with no feet. So anyway, this agony, this agonizing thought of uncertainty, not knowing what is the Sita's fate, is there. And so he's saying, look, I'm still sitting here, I'm waiting for the favor of this ungrateful Vanara king. This is his language now, this is thought. And it's a pity. She walked cheerfully, this is Sita, through the Dandaka forest, as if it were a palace park. She didn't mind the stony ground and the thorns in the path. Well, what must be her suffering now, is his thought. But this king, Sugriva, drowned in his cups of alcohol and reveling in the company of his women, has forgotten his promise to me. So he says to Lakshmana, go at once to Kishkinda and tell this base king, this is his attitude now. Remember, know that the path still yawns open whereby the slaughtered Vali went to his doom. Is a threat. So don't follow him, but fulfill your promise to me. This is his message through Lakshmana. And further, ruin awaits the person, any person, a generalized statement, who forgets kindness and neglects his friends. Beware of Rama's arrows. The 4 months of the rainy season, these are now over. And these 4 months were like 4 ages to Rama. But to you, Sugriva, steeped in pleasures, they have perhaps sped like minutes. By delay, you incur Rama's wrath and seek your destruction. This is the message that Lakshmana is going to give. Now, this was really an angry and impatient message that Rama wanted Lakshmana to take to Sugriva. Sometimes it's necessary to lay things down in a severe way. And carrying this message of his brother's grief and anger, Lakshmana was about to leave, but then Rama thought again, before you leave, because he knew that Lakshmana's nature was a little impetuous also. and feared danger from his rashness. This is how I feel, but you have to convey it in a different way. So he calls him back and says to him, look, in conveying my complaint to Sugriva, don't be too harsh. Whatever his faults, he is our friend. Point out his faults to him, but say nothing harsh. It is a great lesson to all of us. When we see that somebody has wronged us, or we see that maybe a lesson has to be taught, or there's an uncomfortable message we have to deliver, we have to take away our personal attitudes and replace them with something more reasonable, something that won't provoke an overreaction on the other side and destroy a whole friendship. And so anyway, Lakshmana agrees, but he finds it very hard to control his own anger as he approaches these gates of Kishkinda. So, and they look out and see Lakshmana is coming. They see his face, and his face is with a look of utmost severity, and he's fully armed. And the Vanara sentry becomes alert and makes ready to guard the fortress. We're going to be attacked here. And this further enrages Lakshmana. Anyway, some of the Vanaras run to the inner apartments and report to Sugriva, look, Lakshmana is coming, he's furious with anger, and he's coming here with his bow in his hand, and we couldn't stop him. But the Vanara king was a little tipsy. He was a little drunk with the wine. It besets people who are involved in the earthly life and get attracted to it a little bit. And so his judgment and his eyesight may be a little distorted. And of course, he's surrounded by the women and he's enjoying that, all the sensual pleasures, and he doesn't take any notice. He's too much engaged in the world, as most people are. And the king's servants order the sentry at the gates to stand firm and prevent the entry of anyone. But Lakshmana's anger, he becomes quite uncontrollable now. Lakshmana forces his way in. And there he meets young Angada. And the thought of whose youth and misfortunes takes away something of the edge of his anger. So he says, my child, he's addressing Angada, go and tell the Vanara king. Look, he said, that Lakshmana is waiting at the palace gate. He's not going in. And he's waiting for an audience of him on behalf of his grief-stricken brother. That's your message. And so Angada accordingly goes to the king's apartment and he tells him of Lakshmana's visit. But Sugriva was in no condition to understand. Because you see, this involvement takes away your reason. And Angada saw this and took counsel with the ministers. What shall I do? And Hanuman and some of the fellow ministers gently explained what was happening. And in this approach, Sugriva was at last roused from his drunken conditions. So Sugriva says, look, I'm not at fault. I'm not to blame. This is the first excuse we all make. Not my fault. They blame it on the wine. I'm not at fault. And then he seeks verification. I'm not at fault. Am I? Why should my friends Rama and Lakshmana be angry with me? Some enemy must have carried tales and set them up against me. And so Hanuman answered, this is what we call in psychology projection, of course. It's not my fault. Something else made me do it, and it's their fault anyway. But that's not a very good answer. That will serve to antagonize. So he answers, it's my duty, O king, to say these things, Hanuman says, and I say them. He's standing up very boldly. Don't be angry with me. We have delayed in carrying out our promise to Rama, that's a fact. We've forgotten Rama's grief, and it's late, but it's not too late. And so let us do quickly what we should do. Let's seek forgiveness from Lakshmana is the first thing. Apologize. You know, there's a rule in customer care. This is what it is. Apologize and own the problem first, and then see what can we do to rectify it. So let us, without further delay, take steps to fulfill our promise to Rama. And so Sugriva agrees to receive Lakshmana. Now, as Lakshmana goes into the Vanara town, he marvels at its beauty. He marvels at its culture, and passing through beautiful streets, he stands outside the king's palace. So we are inclined to think of the Vanaras as monkeys, and of course there's an element of behavior that shows something of this nature. But we see actually Valmiki describes a very sophisticated city. So passing through the beautiful streets, he stands outside the king's palace, and hearing the sounds of revelry, of dance and song that comes from within, he sees that the Vanaras have absolutely forgotten their promise. Because not just the king that has to act, the whole of the Vanaras have to be mobilized. And they just got lost in their enjoyment. He could hardly control his anger now, but still he holds back. He remembers what Rama has said to him. And he holds back even from entering into where Sugriva is, that is the women's chamber. And standing in a corner outside, he twangs his bow. His bowstring makes this intimidating noise, and the sound fills all of Kishkinda with fear and trembling. If you have no other thing, at least provoke some threat of fear. And Sugriva, hearing it, realizes that the prince is actually angry. Not just pretending, not just, okay, it's a delay. No, he's angry. And he sees the danger and asks Tara, who has emerged as a wise counselor, to go and pacify the prince. That is, we have to employ our wisdom in order to control our emotions. Anyway, a chivalrous man like Lakshmana will find his anger slip from him when he speaks to a lady, so it's a tactical thing. And it would be impossible for him to continue his wrathfulness. And this is the king who is making a shrewd response, even in his unstable, tipsy condition. So Tara advances towards Lakshmana, and in looks, in knowledge of the world, and skill in speech, all of these qualities Tara has, and she's unrivaled in this. So she says to Lakshmana, look, after enduring for a long time poverty and persecution, it's a wonderful strategy. Always agree, always empathize with the other person before you set out your position. I understand you've been living in this cave in poverty and persecution. And Sugriva, I understand also, is enjoying the pleasures and the prosperity that you have secured for him. This enjoyment has gone to his head. He's lost his senses. I know his fault, but you should forgive him. The high-souled who know the foibles and imperfections of our common nature should temper their censure with compassion. We should always be compassionate. We should always understand that we ourselves are not perfect. So don't be too harsh in judging King Sugriva's surrender to temptations of the flesh, especially after his long trials and privations. But I can assure you, he has never lost sight of his debt or his duty to you. There comes the assurance. Yes, we're at fault. I'm sure you'll forgive us. It's gone to his head temporarily, but we haven't forgotten. And he's already issued orders for mobilizing the Vanara warriors from all his quarters. Remember, he delegated this task. And today, either today or tomorrow, anyway soon, they'll all be here. And then we start the search for Sita and the war against Ravana. We understand there will be a war, there's no doubt. So don't have any doubts. Now, come in and see the king. Now she has diplomatically declutched the whole situation. Now he can come in. Imagine if he went in a state of anger. And so Lakshmana, of course, all his anger has slipped away. And he enters the apartment, and Sugriva, descending from his seat, in other words, prepared to honor his guest, welcomes Lakshmana. Then he also says, "Forgive my faults. With Rama's friendship and help, I am king today. And how can I ever forget what I owe to the valorous and good Rama? And I know he can destroy his enemies without any help from me. And I, with my armies, can only follow him. That's all. And surely Rama will perish. The search for Sita, surely Ravana, not Rama, sorry. Yeah, surely Ravana will perish. And so the search for Sita will soon begin. So please forgive the delay. I know I'm guilty of it, but let's move on." Anyway, this pleases Lakshmana, and he says, "Well, Rama is your equal in honor and prowess, none else." He said, "Come with me to Rishamukha and give him words of comfort in his grief. You yourself deliver this message." That would be the honorable thing to do. And so that's what happens. Sugriva and Lakshmana, they go in a procession to Rama, and explaining the arrangements already made, satisfy Rama. Okay, things are moving along. Rama is pleased. And he says, "You indeed are a real friend." Now, that's not what he originally said, but now he understands. Okay, you haven't dishonored your promise. And so, like the clouds yielding rain, the sun destroying darkness, and the moon pleasing human hearts, a good friend comes to one's help spontaneously. I'm happy in your friendship. Now the end of Ravana and his race is certain. And even as Rama was expressing his thankfulness and his joy, even then great multitudes of the Vanaras were assembling under their respective leaders, and they arrive and they assemble. And they are coming from all distant parts of the forests and the mountains and coasts. This is a huge, huge army being assembled. And the dust they raised darkened the skies. Millions of monkeys and bears in variety of shapes and colors were there. And Valmiki understands this because what weapons will you use? What weapons will monkeys use and bears use against the weapons that are presented on the other side? Now Sugriva addresses this enormous army and shows them their appointed camping places. And later he divided the host into 8 divisions and sends each under its commander thoroughly to search the 8 directions for Sita. So while they know basically that Ravana has taken Sita, the exact location and how to get there is exactly unknown at this point. And I suppose there's one point in noting here, and that is that Tara, by some of those who relate this story of Rama, have described her as a chaste widow living a life of discipline and privations. It's different in Valmiki describing this, because he includes Tara and all the other women as part of the inheritance Sugriva has won from Vali. That is the tradition. And in fact, as a part and parcel of taking over the throne, this has been so. But when Sugriva lost himself in bodily pleasures and forgot his duty to Rama, well, Tara herself shared his revels and is described also as being flushed and unsteady with wine, a temporary forgetfulness. And when she goes out at her Lord's command to allay Lakshmana's resentment, this is she is stabilizing as well. Now you see, in ancient times this has to be so because the elder brother has died, leaving his wife Tara, and there was also a custom in the royal and also other noble families for the younger brother to take the widow as a wife and protect her, not just in these ancient regions, but 500 years ago or so, this was, if we're talking about the coronation of King Charles, King Henry VIII, he had to marry the widow of his brother. And then when there were no children coming, he cited this as, okay, well, this seems to be an anomaly. I'm going to go against this custom, and made that excuse. And unfortunately, the queen was a Spanish royal, and when he looked for an exemption from the Pope had made an alliance with King Philip of Spain, and so there was some political difficulty apart from anything else. Anyway, so it happens in many, many different cultures. And I suppose it's difficult for people of one age to judge customs of another age. But of course, imagination and great flexibility of mind are needed just to assess in this whole story the merits and defects of usages, particularly those we're not familiar with. Anyway, Sugriva points out, look, Rama, look at this Vanara army, and all these myriads of wondrous strength are yours to command. They are willing, they're able to do everything for you in your service. They're there at your command. Consider this huge army as your very own army and tell them whatever you wish. Now Rama, of course, by now is beside himself with joy. Some positive thing has happened. Some hope is there. And he embraces Sugriva like a true friend and says, well, first we should find out whether Sita is alive. We should send a mission, what we call a reconnaissance patrol, a recce patrol. And if so, where is she? There's no point in sending an army all the way. We have to be strategic in this. And the next thing we should know is Ravana's exact whereabouts. And then we shall do what needs to be done from there on. But it's for you, not for me or Lakshmana, to command this army, because this army is yours. And so you are their king. And besides, you know best what needs to be done and how to do it. You know the capacity of these forces. So it's over to you. And then Sugriva issues his stringent orders to his commanders at once to send divisions of the army to the four quarters of what seemed to be the earth, as far regions as he could find, to make a thorough search for Sita. And after sending away the other leaders, Sugriva takes Hanuman to one side, and he says, don't forget, Hanuman is the son of the wind itself. Son of Vayu, that is wind, possessing the strength and splendor of your father, that is Vayu itself. You alone can succeed in this task. And you have the strength and courage and intelligence on you. And on you I rely to take up and discharge this responsibility of discovering Sita. Now, there's the old story, I probably have told it before in telling the story of Rama, that it's traditional to think of the mind with its vagaries as something like the monkey mind. And the monkey mind is drunk with the wine of desire. Of course, it's restless by its own nature as well. And Hanuman is also a monkey, or described as such, but also as the son of Vayu, son of the wind. Because you see, when the mind is disciplined, it is powerful like the wind and knows every corner. And so the monkey mind, while restless by its own nature, drunk by the wine of desire, and stung by the scorpion of pride, and possessed by jealousy and so on and so forth. You can imagine the condition. But Hanuman is disciplined. And because of Hanuman's discipline and his love, actually, the turning point, his love for Rama and Sita, we see a great power is there. He's now exerts power that is available to all of us. And see what Sugriva tells him. He says, you have strength, you have courage, you have intelligence. Every mind has potentially strength and courage and intelligence. And this is a great lesson to all of us, that when we discipline the mind through concentration, then it makes the mind extremely powerful. because our Vedanta philosophy tells us that there is only one mind, cosmic mind. What we call our mind is just a kind of substation, a kind of transistor. If you ask what happens to us after death, it'd be like asking what happens to the BBC broadcast right now, broadcasting the coronation, when our little transistor or when our Wi-Fi goes. Well, it continues. There's no death for it. It becomes not a very warranted question if you view it in this way. And so when we engage the mind in a clarified way, our version of it, then it gives us access to the cosmic mind, which is a creative mind, and mobilizes the forces of nature to conclude whatever we set out in thought. Anyway, Rama too feels that Hanuman's efforts would be crowned with success because Hanuman is more disciplined. Whatever obstacles turned up, he feels that Hanuman can find a way of overcoming them, just as we are confident when our own mind is and our own attention is directly possessed and directed, willingly, consciously. And he gives his signal to ring, he gives his own signet ring to Hanuman, thinking that Hanuman will actually discover Sita. And when he does, he presents the ring to say, look, Rama is on his way. He's looking for you. He will rescue you. And Rama asserts, look, I'm full of hope that you'll discover Sita. This ring, he says, will tell her that you are my messenger. And so, dear Hanuman, and Sita won't really recognize you. She needs you. She needs to be presented with this ring. So may you bring Sita and me together again. It's up to you. Now, anybody listening to this story should also realize the solemnity and the pathos of this very scene. Because Rama is full of abiding trust in the devoted loyalty and valor of Hanuman, who is acting as the servant devotee of Rama. And so it's as if the Lord of the universe has a trust for us as we have a trust for him. Something like that. And so for this reason, because of the devoted loyalty and valor of Hanuman, he places this ring as though it was his own hungry heart in his servant's hand. And the ideal servant is accepting the sacred trust with a deep reverence and unshakable resolve, never to fail his master. This is the bhava, the devotional attitude of servant toward master, and the reciprocal response, master to the servant. And so Sugriva gives orders to his army, and Sita must somehow or anyhow, in any way, be discovered. No matter where she is hidden, you can and you must find her. And you must do it within a month. Within a month, you must all return with news of her. Now, given the fact that 4 months have been in the rainy season, a 4 months delay, and now some more delay because of the celebrations of Kishkinda, and we can say now another month, so some 6 months away from the events that are about to unfold. And the army swarmed out like ants from an anthill and spread in the 4 directions. So Tabali and his army proceeds to the north, Vinata goes to east, Shishena goes to the west, Hanuman, Angada, and the general Tara, they travel to the south. And all of them are equally enthusiastic now and equally eager to catch and kill Ravana and redeem Sita. And each group is anxious to be the first to return with success or successful news. And so there was, in fact, a great deal of rivalry amongst the groups going out. And Rama inquires of Sugriva, see, you describe every quarter and region of the earth like one who has seen the whole world with his own eyes. I'm amazed. You know the geography of north, south, east, and west. And I'm curious, how and when did you see all of this? Now you remember, my lord, says Sugriva, how Wali pursued me in all directions. So I know the countryside well in all directions. And wherever I went, he still pursued me. And so I had to wander over the face of the whole world, well, what seemed like the whole world for him. And so I had occasion to see every part of what I consider to be this planet. And so later I learned about the spot where Rishi Matanga had built his ashram. That's where I took refuge. And if Wali entered that region, his head would go to shivers by the sage's curse. And I knew that he wouldn't come to that place. And I knew he couldn't harm me, even if he came. So there, in fact, I lay protected, as you know. Now the hordes that went north, east, and west returned in a month and reported no trace. Sorry, Sita was not to be found anywhere, and they got no information. And carefully, they say, we did it diligently. We searched the forests, we searched the mountains, the rivers, we went into all the cities. We couldn't find her anywhere. And Hanuman, who had gone southwards, he's the lucky one. So didn't the Rakshasa carry Sita also travel southwards? Didn't we pick up that clue anyway? And Hanuman has not yet come back to us. We are all here. He's still looking. So by elimination, he's the one who should make the discovery. Anyway, Rama hears this. He becomes satisfied that the Vanaras have done their very best and that Hanuman and Angada entered and searched the caves and forest of the Vindhyas. And then they came upon a desert. And in this desert, there was a rishi who was performing tapas. What is tapas? Tapas is an arrangement where we strengthen the will by organizing the senses in a directed, conscious way. And by his curse, that is the rishi's curse, it was devoid of trees and plants, of birds and beasts. And traveling further south, they saw a big ashara. Now, ashara, the word ashara originally meant a powerful being. It referred to all the deities, good or bad. But ultimately, in the evolution of the Vedas, came to be those who were powerful and yet were not illumined beings. That original ashra meaning was adopted in ancient Persia or Iran, and so that the Zoroastrians, followers of the prophet Zarathustra, still have for their supreme deity this word ashra. They can't say, they have to say ahura, ahura mazda. And so just a little bit of extra information. Anyway, they saw a big ashra. The cruel one, regarding the Vanara crowd as a good meal, sprang up to catch them. They thought at first that this was just another, no other. They thought this was in fact Ravana himself. And so Angada rushes towards him and gives him a mighty blow. And unable to stand it, the ashra spits blood and falls on the earth and lies dead with a great hill. And rejoicing in the thought that, Ravana is dead, we've killed him, the Vanaras searched the forest for Sita, but there was no sign of her. And so they carried the search elsewhere. And often they would weary of their fruitless search and sit down in blank despair. Now, Valmiki describes all of this in great detail to show us that when we search for something, even when we search for the truth, we will find highways and byways, and we won't exactly find what we're looking for. But nevertheless, the search itself is important. And so often, as I say, they would lose heart a little bit. They would see that their search was fruitless. They would sit down. They would go into blank despair. And at these moments, Angada, Angada or Gandhamardana or some other leader would encourage the whole group and make them resume the search. Whenever we seem to lose hope, some element within us has to pick up the pieces and assert, no, wait, we can continue. We should not lose heart. So many days were spent actually in this way, and yet Sita wasn't to be seen. And they dreaded Sugriva's displeasure if we don't come back with a result. We dare not come back with no result. And so, for this reason, they travel southwards more and more in search, passing through all kinds of things, deserts, and sometimes fainting with hunger and thirst. And they see a cave from which issues a variety of birds full of joy of life. And the gentle breeze which comes out of it covered them with the pollen of lotus flowers and fills them with fragrance. And the Vanaras now conclude, undoubtedly there was water where the birds and perfume came from. And the Vanaras, forming a chain with linked hands, plunge cautiously into the dense darkness of the cave, with hearts full of hope. And though too parched with thirst, even to shout, but at long last, all of a sudden, a light appears, and they see a lovely grove with streams of placid water and trees. And everything is bowing under the wealth of fruit. And they come to a city with streets which are paved with jewels, set in gold and great palaces, beautiful as a dream, and we can imagine this in a Walt Disney cartoon colors for our pleasure. And they go along, and then they see an aged Tapasini clad in the garments of a recluse and seated on a dark skin. And the Vanaras tremble before the divine splendor of her face. And there we'll leave the story for this week. And we'll pick up how the adventurous Hanuman and his Angada and his group progress from there. So we leave it off at that point. And I hope we managed to learn not just the elements of the story, but also the psychological, philosophical, and spiritual values in the story. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.